Okay, Wildcats, here we're at activity 4.3, transformations inside the functions. Consider these absolute value functions. Graph each function, then sketch and label the graph of each function. Describe how m of x and n of x relate to g of x. Okay, so when x is negative 1, that's the absolute value of negative 1, which equals positive 1. Absolute value of 0 equals 0. Absolute value of 1 equals 1. Okay, so now let's go ahead and graph g of x in yellow. So negative 1, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1. Okay. All right, now let's take a look at m of x. Okay. So when x is 1, that's the absolute value of 1 minus 2, which equals the absolute value of negative 1, which equals 1. 2 minus 2 is the absolute value of 0, which equals 0. 3 minus 2, which equals 1, which equals 1. Okay, so let's go ahead and graph those points. Okay, and we'll go ahead and graph this in blue. All right. So now 1, 1, 2, 0, and then 3, 1. All right. I want you to graph n of x. All right. So the graph of m of x is a translation of 2 units to the right. The graph of n of x is a translation of, you can answer that after you've graphed. So graph and then answer that. Okay. All right. Let's take a look at the next. A function t of x of the form t of x equals f parentheses x minus c is a horizontal translation of the function f of x. The value, absolute value c, describes the number of units the graph of f of x is translated right or left. If c is greater than 0, the graph is translated to the right. If c is less than 0, the graph is translated to the left. Write the function m of x and n of x in terms of the basic function g of x. Describe how changing the c value in the function m of x and n of x horizontally translated the function g of x. M of x equals g parentheses x minus 2. Change the c value to 2 translated to the function g of x horizontally 2 units to the right of m of x. N of x equals g parentheses x plus 2. Changing the c value to negative 2 translates the function g of x horizontally. All right. To answer that, you graph, you answer that, and then you can answer this. Okay? All right. Number 3. Use the coordinate notation to show how each point x and y on the graph of g of x becomes a point on the graph that has been horizontally translated. Each point x, y of g of x becomes the point x plus c, y, or parentheses x minus c, y, on the graph the function has been horizontally translated. All right, let's take a look at the next page. Okay, consider the absolute value functions. Graph each function, then sketch label the graph of each function. Okay, now I'm going to use, let me zoom out. I'm going to use this space to graph each of these. All right, so take a few moments to write that down. All right, so now let's take a look at g of x. So that's the absolute value of negative 2, which equals 2. Absolute value of 0 equals 0. Absolute value of 2 equals 2. Let's go ahead and graph that in yellow. So negative 2, 2, 0, 0, 2, 2. Okay. Now let's graph j of x, and let's go ahead and do that in blue. Okay. So that's the absolute value of negative 2 times 2, which equals 4. Then the absolute value of negative 2 times 0 equals 0. The absolute value of negative 2 times 2 equals 4. Okay. Let's go ahead and graph that. Okay. So negative 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 0, 0, 2, 4. Okay. All right. You graph k of x and p of x. Okay. And I provided that information to graph here and here. Okay. Now, number 5, write the function j of x, k of x, and p of x in terms of the basic function g of x. Then describe the transformations of each function. J of x equals g parentheses 2 of x. The graph of j of x is a horizontal compression of 1/2. K of x equals g of 1/2 x. The graph of k of x is a horizontal stretch of 2. P of x is g of negative x. The graph of p of x is a reflection across the y-axis. Describe each graph in relation to the basic function g of x equals absolute value of x. Then use coordinate notation to represent the horizontalization. F of x equals g of b times x, where b is greater than 1. The graph of f of x is a horizontal compression. F of x equals g parentheses b of x when b is less than 0. The graph of f of x is a reflection across the y-axis. When f of x equals g parentheses of negative x, when 0 is less than b is less than 1, the graph of f of x is a horizontal stretch. Each point x, y on the graph of g of x becomes the point 1 divided by b, y on f of x. All right, go ahead and finish this up and have a wonderful Wildcat